something is approaching. And if you have been feeling that something in your life is about to shift, do not dismiss that feeling as imagination. Consider this your warning before the lunar eclipse arrives. And listen closely, because this message may reach you at the exact point when you are finally capable of understanding what has been unfolding inside you. There is a reason certain words feel strangely personal right now. There is a reason your intuition may be louder than usual. If some quiet part of you is recognizing yourself in what you are hearing, write aligned in the comments and subscribe. Because this message is meant for those who are willing to become conscious of what is changing rather than remain asleep inside familiar patterns. Sometimes guidance does not appear as an obvious miracle or an overwhelming emotional experience. Sometimes it comes through information, a conversation, a video, a resource, or a simple message that crosses your path at the precise moment you are ready to understand it. That is how the signs around you may have been working all week. The lunar eclipse does not wait for your permission, and it does not require you to feel prepared before it begins exposing what can no longer remain hidden. It can feel like an interruption in the story you thought you were controlling, because what you have tried to organize, suppress, postpone, or rationalize can suddenly become impossible to ignore. Imagine a door that has been quietly closing while another entrance is beginning to appear at the same time. That is the strange tension surrounding this eclipse. One chapter is losing its ability to continue, while another possibility is beginning to reveal itself. You may already sense this without knowing how to explain it. Perhaps there is a part of your inner world that has been saying for weeks that something is finished, even though your outer life has not caught up with that realization. The real question is not whether change is coming, but whether you will participate consciously in the ending or resist it until circumstances make the ending unavoidable. This is not meant to frighten you. It is meant to wake you up. The universe is not offering comfortable half answers through this moment. Lunar eclipse energy can bring buried material into awareness, and this particular eclipse arrives with the feeling that personal karma and collective karma are meeting at the same threshold. Experiences you thought were finished may suddenly demand your attention again. Old emotional wounds may become visible. Familiar timelines may begin to lose their grip. Even an older version of yourself, one you believed you had already outgrown, may appear again so you can finally understand why it could not accompany you any further. The blood moon does not necessarily create the disorder you suddenly notice. It can illuminate what was already operating beneath the appearance of ordinary life. The relationship you have secretly questioned may become impossible to ignore. The work that has been exhausting something deeper than your energy may suddenly feel unbearable. The habit of abandoning your own needs to preserve someone else's comfort may finally confront you with its true cost. What once looked normal may begin to look completely different under this heightened light. That is why the emotional atmosphere may feel heavier than usual. Astrologers, mystics, and starseeds have been sensing and discussing this intensity for months, with the feeling that something connected to ancestry, karma, and fate is reaching a point of consequence. If you have been unusually affected by the atmosphere around you, do not immediately assume that you are simply too emotional or too sensitive. You may be noticing changes within yourself before you can put those changes into words. The feeling can resemble carrying something invisible, something your body recognizes before your conscious mind understands what it means. And if you have arrived here while experiencing that sensation, allow yourself to consider that your awareness may already be preparing you for what is being revealed. Look back over the last few weeks and notice what has changed inside your private world. Have your dreams become unusually vivid, symbolic, or unsettling? Have you awakened carrying an emotional residue from a dream that stayed with you long after the morning began? Have you experienced an exhaustion that seems disproportionate to what you have physically done, as though your body is responding to an internal process that your reasoning mind has not yet identified? Have people from your past begun appearing in unexpected ways. Maybe an ex contacted you. Maybe an old friendship came back into your thoughts after years of silence. Maybe a person you have not consciously remembered for a long time suddenly appeared in your mind without any obvious reason. These moments can feel random when viewed separately, but together they may seem like a pattern. They are the kind of subtle signals that can loosen your attachment to old emotional roots before the eclipse brings what has been buried closer to the surface. You may also have noticed that your emotions have become easier to trigger. Something small may have brought tears when you normally would have remained composed. You may have found yourself wanting distance from conversations, obligations, and expectations that once seemed manageable. Instead of seeking constant interaction, perhaps you have felt an almost physical need to withdraw, become quiet, and hear your own thoughts without everyone else's demands surrounding you. At the same time, synchronicities may seem to be accumulating. Repeating numbers may catch your attention. Unexpected signs may appear at strangely precise moments. A familiar situation may produce a powerful sense of déjà vu, causing you to pause and wonder why the moment feels strangely familiar. Whether you interpret these experiences spiritually or psychologically, their deeper significance within this eclipse period is that your attention is being pulled toward material you may have previously overlooked. Something inside you is becoming less willing to remain unconscious. It is as though your inner self has been preparing for a departure before your conscious identity has agreed that it is time to leave. You may not yet know exactly what you are leaving behind, and you may not even have language for the transformation taking place, but the emotional preparation can already be underway. This is why you should not casually dismiss what has been appearing in your dreams, memories, emotions, or patterns. These experiences can function like private messages written in a language that only your own life can fully translate. They may be drawing your attention toward the places where you have remained attached, where you have delayed a necessary ending, or where you have continued carrying an identity that no longer reflects who you are becoming. And I want to be direct with you here, because pretending that everything is comfortable will not help you grow. If you feel the pull of this eclipse and choose to bury it under distraction, emotional numbness, constant busyness, or forced positivity, the release does not necessarily disappear. The inner pressure can continue building until what needs to surface finds another way out. The difference is whether you meet the process consciously, allowing yourself to recognize what is changing, or whether you resist until circumstances force you to confront it. This is the point where awareness becomes your greatest form of preparation, because the eclipse is not asking you to live in fear of what comes next. It is asking you to become present enough to recognize what is already ending within you, and that recognition is where the deeper turning point begins. What you refuse to process does not simply vanish, and that is the part you need to understand before this lunar eclipse reaches its peak. Feelings that remain buried can eventually find another language, appearing through sudden conflict, unexplained illness, unexpected endings, or a weight inside you that continues following you from one moon cycle into the next, and then into another. The emotional truth you avoid today can become tomorrow's tension if you never give yourself permission to face it. This is why eclipse energy can feel so intense for people who have become accustomed to avoiding uncomfortable truths. An eclipse has a way of bringing attention to whatever has been pushed beneath the surface, often at the precise moment when you believe you are least capable of dealing with it. That is why eclipse season is so often described as unstable, unpredictable, chaotic, or even frightening. The intensity is not necessarily a punishment, and it does not mean the universe is working against you. The deeper issue is that people can spend years distracting themselves from what they know inside, and when an eclipse arrives, avoidance becomes much harder to maintain. Yet you are still here. You chose to press play. You continued listening, and something within you has remained attentive to these words instead of turning away. That matters because your willingness to listen suggests that you may be capable of approaching this eclipse with awareness rather than resistance. You do not have to enter this period blindly. You can meet it awake, conscious, and prepared to recognize what your inner world has been trying to show you. The goal is not to emerge from the blood moon feeling destroyed by everything that has been exposed. The deeper possibility is to allow the experience to reshape you by releasing what has already become too heavy to carry. Before the eclipse reaches its strongest point, there is a narrow period in which your energy can feel especially flexible, receptive, and open to transformation. Mystical traditions have referred to these moments as threshold hours, a liminal space that exists between an old state of being and whatever is beginning to emerge. Within this symbolic window, your intentions can feel especially powerful because your subconscious may be more open to loosening its grip on emotional material that has been held tightly for years. Think of it as a moment when the boundaries around your inner world become less rigid, giving you an opportunity to consciously participate in the process of release. Instead of waiting for circumstances to force something out of you, you can make a deliberate choice to let it go. This is where the preparation becomes personal. Ask yourself what you are willing to allow to end. It may be a belief that has shaped your decisions for too long. It may be a relationship you have continued carrying, even though something inside you knows it cannot move forward with you. It may be an identity constructed around fear, insecurity, or survival, rather than one built from what you genuinely know to be true. Do not answer that question quickly simply because silence feels uncomfortable. Sit with it. Give the thought enough space to rise naturally, because when you finally stop covering your inner voice with constant noise, the truth often arrives without needing to be forced. Pay attention to the first thing that becomes emotionally undeniable. The image, memory, belief, relationship, or version of yourself that appears in your awareness at this moment may feel especially significant within the symbolic framework of the blood moon. Do not immediately push it away because it makes you uncomfortable. Allow yourself to recognize what you have been carrying and why you have continued carrying it. Sometimes the hardest part of release is admitting that something has already ended internally, even though your outer life has not accepted the ending yet. That realization can become the beginning of conscious change. And if you want to understand how to prepare your body, your surroundings, and your spirit before the eclipse moves fully into its work, remain here, because the next step moves from awareness into preparation, from recognizing what must be released to creating the conditions in which you can actually release it. If you are ready to receive the blood moon energy, comment blood moon and continue with me, because now the preparation becomes tangible. Before the eclipse reaches its peak, begin by treating your body as something that deserves clarity rather than overload. Your body does not need to be perfect for this. The purpose is intention. Start with the physical environment around you, not through obsessive cleaning, but through symbolic cleansing that gives your mind and emotions a clear signal that you are making space for something different. Open a window, even for 5 minutes, and allow the old air to move out while fresh air enters. The atmosphere of your home can begin to feel connected to your own internal atmosphere when you have been carrying emotional heaviness for too long. So changing the air around you can become a simple physical representation of allowing stagnation to move. If sage is available to you, use it. If you have Palo Santo, use it. If neither is available, a candle accompanied by quiet intention can serve the same symbolic purpose within this practice. Move through your space calmly and silently. Declare that whatever no longer serves your highest timeline is permitted to leave. You are not trying to force anything. You are creating an intentional environment in which release becomes easier to acknowledge. Then slow down and drink water consciously, instead of treating it as something you simply consume without thought. Imagine the water moving through you and washing away old emotional residue that you have been holding within your body. In the symbolic language of astrology and spiritual practice, this connection matters because the moon is associated with water, tides, and the natural movement of emotional experience. Just as the moon influences the rise and fall of tides, the lunar cycle is often used as a mirror for the changing currents within the emotional body. If you are able to do so, take a shower or a bath before the eclipse begins. As the water touches your skin, allow yourself to imagine that each drop represents something you no longer need to continue carrying. Let the physical act of washing become an intentional act of emotional release rather than something performed automatically. Afterward, dim the lights. Remove unnecessary noise from the room. Give yourself enough quiet for your nervous system to recognize that you do not need to remain in a constant state of defense. The purpose is not to prepare for some external threat. It is to soften your resistance so that you can listen more clearly to what is happening within you. Your body is more than a physical container in this spiritual framework. It is treated as a receiver, an instrument capable of responding to subtle experiences that many people have forgotten how to notice. When you approach the blood moon from this perspective, preparation becomes less about creating perfect conditions and more about creating stillness. The eclipse does not need you to manufacture chaos around yourself. What matters is making enough internal and external space for truth to become visible. Once that space has been created, the next stage is where intention begins, becoming action. Your private thought becomes a deliberate decision, and that decision becomes a symbolic declaration of what you are prepared to release. Take an actual piece of paper, something physical that you can hold in your hands, and during the hours before the eclipse reaches its peak, begin writing down everything you are ready to release. This is not the moment to edit yourself according to what sounds spiritually polished or acceptable. Do not try to make your words beautiful. Do not shape your answer around what you think you are supposed to say. Let the page hold the truth exactly as you experience it, because the value of this practice comes from honesty rather than performance. Write what you have been carrying, what you know you are ready to stop carrying, and what you recognize can no longer remain unchanged as you approach the eclipse. The more honestly you meet this moment, the more clearly you can recognize the emotional material that has been waiting beneath the surface. And that is where the next stage of this eclipse preparation begins. Do not soften what you write down now, because this is the moment to put the truth on the page exactly as it exists inside you. Give yourself permission to acknowledge the resentment you have swallowed, the fear that people will never truly see you, and the exhausting attachment to an older identity that keeps finding its way back into your choices. Write about the parts of yourself you rarely admit exist. Write about what still hurts, what still angers you, what you have pretended no longer matters, and the version of yourself you keep returning to even after promising that you were finished with it. Keep writing until you feel that you have emptied something real from within yourself, until the page contains emotions you have been carrying silently for months. Then, if you are comfortable doing so, read your words aloud at a slow pace. Let your own voice become the witness that acknowledges what you have finally chosen to face. You are not performing for anyone. You are giving expression to something that has existed quietly inside you, and there is something deeply significant about hearing yourself speak the truth you have previously kept hidden. Long before organized religion created formal language around spirituality, human beings were already using written words as symbols of intention, release, burial, and transformation. The practice of writing something down and then physically releasing it has existed as an ancient human expression of letting go. In this spiritual framework, words are treated as carriers of vibration, and vibration becomes the language through which intention is expressed to the universe. If you can safely burn the paper, you may do so and observe the smoke rising after you have finished reading it. As the paper disappears, imagine the emotional weight represented by those sentences leaving your possession as well, rising into the same night sky beneath which the blood moon is preparing to appear. If burning the paper is not practical or safe, there are other symbolic ways to complete the act. You can bury it, tear it into pieces, or fold it and put it somewhere with the deliberate understanding that you have reached an ending. The physical method is not the heart of the practice. The decision behind it is. You are telling yourself that this particular burden does not have to continue defining your future. You are drawing a boundary beneath an ancient red light and deciding that what belongs to the past does not automatically receive permission to follow you forward. As the eclipse moves closer to its peak, something else may begin happening inside you. The emotional fog that has surrounded certain situations can suddenly become thinner, allowing a sharp kind of understanding to emerge. You may recognize something about a person you have avoided confronting. You may see a situation differently. You may suddenly understand why you have continued walking toward a path that never truly felt right. The intensity of the eclipse can contain a hidden gift, because its symbolic role is not limited to endings. It can also reveal. Under that blood moon symbolism, you may begin distinguishing between the people who have genuinely shared your journey and those who have remained in your life, mainly because familiarity felt easier than change. You may also recognize dreams you abandoned, not because those dreams were wrong for you, but because you gradually convinced yourself that you were not permitted to want them. This is why your thoughts deserve careful attention during the eclipse window. If a particular name suddenly enters your mind, if an old memory returns, or if you suddenly feel drawn toward a decision you have delayed for a long time, do not automatically treat the experience as a distraction. Within the spiritual meaning of this eclipse, these unexpected thoughts can become part of the very process you are being asked to examine. Eclipses are associated with accelerated truth, moments in which realizations that might normally unfold slowly can appear with surprising speed. Something that could have taken years of gradual self-awareness to understand may suddenly become clear within hours beneath this red light. But the clarity requires one thing from you. You have to be willing to look. The eclipse can be imagined as a cosmic mirror placed directly in front of you, reflecting aspects of your life that you may have become skilled at avoiding. Looking into that mirror may be uncomfortable, but refusing to look does not make the reflection disappear. There is another layer of this experience that many of you may already be living through. Some of you are encountering the exact relationships, circumstances, and emotional triggers about which you have been asking for clarity. You may have prayed for an answer and then found an old relationship appearing again. You may have believed you had healed from something, only to discover that the same emotional reaction still exists beneath the surface. When someone from the past returns, the deeper question may not simply be whether they belong in your future. It may be whether you have genuinely healed, or whether you have simply become more skilled at avoiding the pain they once activated. Likewise, if self-doubt suddenly becomes louder during this period, do not automatically interpret that feeling as proof that you are weak. Within this spiritual interpretation, that insecurity can represent the final resistance of the identity that has kept you small before a larger version of yourself begins to emerge. You may feel more irritated than usual. You may become more emotional. You may notice that experiences which normally would not affect you suddenly reach much deeper. Do not immediately label yourself as broken because of that sensitivity. Think of gold placed into intense heat. The heat is not evidence that the gold has failed. It is part of the process through which impurities are separated from what is valuable. In the same symbolic way, the intensity surrounding this eclipse can represent a refining process. If you feel the pressure, it may be because something important inside you is being separated from emotional burdens that were never meant to remain yours forever. Discomfort does not automatically mean that you have made a mistake. Emotional intensity does not automatically mean that you are moving in the wrong direction. Some people may experience eclipse season without consciously noticing much, because they have spent so much time suppressing their intuition that they no longer recognize its signals. Your experience may feel different because you are paying attention. You are noticing the shifts. You are allowing yourself to feel what you once pushed away. That sensitivity can become exhausting, but within the spiritual framework of this message, it is also the reason you were drawn here at this particular moment. What you are experiencing does not need to become a source of shame. It can become something you learn to understand. And remember this as the eclipse begins closing certain chapters. Every ending contains the possibility of a beginning that cannot be fully seen yet. A relationship may close. A job may reach its natural conclusion. An identity you have already outgrown may finally lose its place in your life. Yet the same force that closes one door can symbolically create space for another. This is one of the easiest truths to forget when eclipse energy feels chaotic. The discomfort does not necessarily mean that you have been abandoned by the universe. Within this spiritual perspective, it can mean that your position is changing. Imagine trying to walk through a new doorway while your hands are still filled with pieces of the old one. You cannot receive something new comfortably when you are still gripping what is already broken. The grieving, the release, and the uncomfortable clarity can therefore become part of the process of making your hands available for what comes next. Something is coming, and this message presents that possibility not as empty reassurance, but as something connected to the symbolic mechanics of eclipse cycles. What begins in darkness eventually moves toward illumination. The door associated with August 27th is not presented as a punishment. It is described as a precise clearing of space, creating room for an alignment that could not fully arrive while the previous door remained open. And this is where the meaning of the eclipse extends beyond the night itself, because what happens after the blood moon may become just as important as what happens while you are watching it. Once the eclipse has passed and the red light gradually fades back into the ordinary night sky, you may notice that something about your inner experience has changed. This is not simply about dramatic transformation for its own sake. In the spiritual interpretation of eclipses, their purpose is to disrupt stagnation and prevent you from remaining indefinitely in a state that has already reached its limit. During the days and weeks afterward, pay attention to what mystics describe as destiny acceleration. An opportunity may appear unexpectedly. A conversation may alter the direction of a relationship. A decision that has kept you uncertain for months may suddenly become much easier to understand. These experiences can feel like movement returning after a long period of emotional suspension, as though the release you initiated in darkness is now becoming forward motion in your life. Some of you may experience an unexpected sense of lightness. You may suddenly realize that you had become so accustomed to carrying a particular emotional burden that you stopped remembering what life felt like without it. Others may discover an unusually strong certainty about what they want next. That clarity can feel unfamiliar because fear has been clouding the decision for so long that choosing without fear may initially feel almost foreign. Within this spiritual framework, that clarity becomes the result of choosing awareness instead of avoidance and meeting the eclipse consciously instead of remaining unconscious to what it is revealing. Destiny is not always experienced as a straight road. It can resemble a spiral, returning you to familiar themes while giving you opportunities to respond from a deeper level of understanding. What you release during this cycle does not need to return in exactly the same form for you to face it again. A lesson that has repeated can reach completion, allowing you to move into another stage of growth. The days immediately following the lunar eclipse deserve attention as well. Even after the visible event has ended, your nervous system, intuition, and emotional body may feel unusually delicate, similar to a freshly cleaned wound that remains exposed while it begins to recover. This is why the aftermath is not the ideal moment for impulsive or dramatic decisions driven solely by emotional intensity. Instead, move more gently. Give yourself additional rest. Protect your energy from people and circumstances that consistently drain rather than nourish you. If someone from your past appears again during this period and attempts to draw you into an old dynamic, pause before responding. Do not let familiarity make the decision for you. Ask yourself one honest question. Does this person fit the version of yourself that this eclipse has revealed, or are they attempting to reconnect you with the identity you have just decided to release? Pay attention to the answer that arrives naturally before your mind begins building arguments around it. Because within this spiritual framework, your intuition may feel unusually clear after the emotional static has begun to settle. And as that clarity develops, the next stage is no longer about what you are leaving behind, but about understanding what this newly opened space is asking you to become. If you have the opportunity, step away from artificial noise and spend some time outdoors, allowing nature to become part of the way you settle into the aftermath of this eclipse. Let your bare feet touch the ground, and give yourself a few quiet moments to feel physically connected to the earth beneath you. Then, keep a journal close during the nights that follow, especially if your dreams become unusually vivid or emotionally charged. Write down what you remember as soon as you can, because the subconscious process does not necessarily stop when the eclipse ends or when the moon returns to its familiar appearance in the night sky. Something can continue moving internally long after the visible celestial event has passed. What you are experiencing is not simply about making it through an intense eclipse period. It is about learning how to live with and understand the transformation that has already begun. Release may be dramatic, but integration requires patience, attention, and the same respect you gave to the act of letting go. There may be some of you who have spent quiet moments asking for confirmation, wondering whether you are imagining the changes you sense within yourself, questioning whether it is reasonable to desire something different, or privately asking the universe to prove that the feeling of something larger unfolding beneath ordinary life is real. If you have been waiting for that confirmation, receive these words as your sign. Finding this message at this particular point, only days before the eclipse reaches its peak, is presented here as more than random timing. It is a moment of confirmation within the spiritual meaning of this message. Alignment is not wasted. The idea is that guidance reaches you when some part of you has already developed enough awareness to recognize it. You may have sensed the coming shift before you had the vocabulary to explain it. Perhaps you noticed that something felt different without being able to identify exactly what had changed. Perhaps your body reacted before your reasoning mind could construct an explanation. Trust that deeper awareness. Notice the physical sensations moving through you as you listen. If you feel goosebumps, pay attention. If emotion rises unexpectedly and you feel tears gathering, do not automatically suppress them. Within this spiritual framework, these responses are not meaningless. They can be understood as the body's ancient language for recognizing something before the conscious mind has completely processed it. You have been described as chosen, but not chosen, in the sense that you are protected from difficulty or somehow exempt from struggle. You are chosen in the sense that you are being called toward greater awareness, toward a life in which you remain conscious of the lessons unfolding around you instead of moving through them without noticing. You are not being abandoned inside this process. The eclipse is not simply something happening against you. It is being presented as an experience working in your favor, and everything you have noticed leading up to this point can be viewed as preparation for the transition ahead. So before the eclipse arrives, remember the most important instruction. Do not approach it while deliberately distracting yourself from what you already know. Do not enter this period determined to resist every uncomfortable realization simply because accepting it would require change. Do not pretend that nothing needs to move when your inner world has already been telling you otherwise. The portal associated with August 27th does not organize itself around human convenience. It does not wait until your schedule is clear or until you feel emotionally comfortable. Within the spiritual interpretation of this message, it moves according to a larger cosmic order that is not dependent upon hesitation. If you have been feeling an increasing desire to release something, whether that is a relationship, an identity you have outgrown, or a fear that has influenced your choices for years. Do not automatically silence that impulse simply because remaining familiar feels safer. Fear can make stagnation look like security, but those two experiences are not identical. Staying in the same place because you are afraid of what happens next can feel safe in the short term, while quietly preventing you from moving toward what you already know is necessary. The people who move most quickly after this eclipse are described as those who allow themselves to experience the discomfort rather than immediately escaping from it. They are willing to let the blood moon symbolize the burning away of what no longer belongs, instead of desperately holding on to the remains of what has already ended. You have heard the warning. You have been shown the preparation. You have been given the symbolic ritual and the explanation for why this moment carries meaning within the spiritual framework of the message. Now the responsibility becomes personal. The way you respond to what you have recognized can influence which version of your future timeline you move toward once the eclipse energy begins to fade. This is not intended as fear for the sake of fear. It is preparation offered through urgency, care, and respect for the person you are becoming. Look honestly at the path that brought you here. Remember the restlessness that appeared without an obvious explanation. Remember the vivid dreams. Remember the memories that suddenly returned. Remember the strange internal pull that made you stop scrolling and listen to these words instead of moving on to something else. Within the meaning of this message, none of those experiences are treated as meaningless accidents. You are always going to encounter this message at the moment when you could recognize it, because your deeper self is presented as having understood the coming shift before your conscious mind could explain it. The blood moon, rising on August 27th, is therefore presented as more than a celestial occurrence. It becomes a symbolic appointment, a checkpoint within your journey, an opportunity to demonstrate whether you are willing to release what no longer supports the person you are becoming. You are not late. You have not missed your moment. You are not somehow behind everyone else. You are standing precisely where this chapter has brought you, at the threshold of a transition that has been prepared through every restless night, every unexplained emotional moment, and every quiet thought that something inside your life has changed. As the eclipse approaches, walk toward it consciously. Bring the lessons you have already recognized. Bring the things you have written down. Bring the grief you have finally allowed yourself to acknowledge. Do not demand that yourself be untouched by the experience. Instead, allow yourself to arrive honestly, having released what was ready to leave, having given language to what needed to be expressed, and having honored what needed to be mourned. Then, when the blood moon rises completely, imagine allowing that light to witness you without resistance. Let it represent a moment in which you stop fighting the necessary transformation and allow yourself to surrender to what you already know. Surrender here does not mean weakness. It means releasing the exhausting struggle against a truth that has already become clear. In this moment, surrender is presented as a deeper form of strength, because it requires you to trust yourself enough to stop gripping what cannot remain. And if these words have reached something private inside you tonight, if you felt recognized, awakened, activated, or quietly reminded of a truth you had been avoiding, then mark this moment consciously. Comment the word reborn so you can acknowledge that you received the message and are choosing to approach the eclipse with awareness, together with others who feel called to do the same. Then subscribe, because this moment is only one part of what is unfolding across the sky during this season. And there is still more guidance ahead as these celestial developments continue.